A simple act of kindness from a waitress to a frightened boy set off a chain of events that would change not just one life, but reveal the true power of compassion in the most unexpected way. The wind outside was strong that morning. Snowflakes danced in the air, and the sky was a dull shade of gray. The roads were wet, and the trees looked lifeless under the weight of the frost. Inside the small diner at the edge of town, it was warmer, but still quiet. Only a few regulars had walked in that morning. Most people had decided to stay in, hiding from the biting cold. Emily, a young waitress in her early 20s, was already on her feet, cleaning tables and getting coffee ready. For the day, her long brown hair was tied back, and her hands were rough from constant work. She had been working at this place for nearly 3 years. Every morning felt the same: early wake-up, long hours, tired feet, and little money at the end of it all. But she didn't complain. She had learned to survive, even when life didn't give her much to smile about. As she walked past one of the windows, she noticed something strange. A small figure was standing just outside the door. At first, she thought it was a shadow. Then she saw the small hands rubbing together in the shape of a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. He was wearing a thin hoodie, jeans that looked too short for his legs, and shoes with holes in them. His backpack was hanging loosely from his shoulders. Snow had gathered on his hair. He looked lost, scared, and cold. Emily walked quickly to the door and opened it. The cold rushed in. The boy flinched, but she gave him a gentle smile. "Come inside, sweetie," she said softly, her voice calm and warm. The boy didn't say a word. He simply nodded and stepped in. Emily quickly closed the door behind him and helped him take off his wet hoodie. His fingers were red from the cold, and his body was slightly shaking. She guided him to the nearest booth and wrapped a dry kitchen towel around his hands. "You okay?" she asked, kneeling next to him. The boy stared at her but didn't speak. His eyes were wide, tired, and filled with something Emily couldn't name. Was it fear, confusion, pain? He looked like he hadn't slept properly in days. She didn't want to scare him by asking too many questions. So she walked over to the kitchen and made him a cup of warm milk. She added a little honey, hoping the sweetness would comfort him. When she placed it in front of him, he looked at it for a long moment before picking it up with shaky hands. He took a sip. His eyes closed briefly, as if the warmth had finally touched his soul. That small moment made Emily feel something stir in her heart. This wasn't just a lost child. Something was deeply wrong. She sat at the booth across from him, giving him space, but staying close. "My name's Emily," she said softly. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but I'm here, okay?" The boy looked up for a second and gave the tiniest nod. That was enough for her. A few minutes passed. The other customers in the diner looked over curiously, whispering among themselves. But Emily ignored them. She didn't care what people thought. She cared about the child who now had colors slowly returning to his cheeks. She noticed how he held his backpack tightly, as if it was the only thing he owned. Emily got up and walked to the back counter. There was a small shelf where they kept items left behind by customers. One of those items was a small green toy. Dinosaur plastic, with one eye missing. It had been left there weeks ago. No one ever came to claim it. She picked it up, wiped the dust off, and walked back to the boy. She placed it gently on the table. The boy looked at it, then at her. His eyes widened slightly. Emily smiled and pushed it closer to him. "He's yours now," she said. The boy slowly reached out and took the toy in his hand. His fingers were still trembling, but there was a small shift in his expression. The fear in his eyes faded just a little. He didn't smile, but he didn't look as scared anymore. He held the dinosaur close to his chest like a treasure. That small act, that tiny toy, had brought a little bit of safety to him. Emily watched him quietly. Something inside her heart felt heavy. She had seen struggling families before, single mothers coming in with hungry kids, tired fathers trying to stretch their last dollar. But this felt different. The boy was alone. No adult had come looking for him. He didn't have a phone, wasn't crying, but his silence was even more alarming. It was the kind of silence that came from someone used to being alone. She walked. back to the kitchen and asked the cook, Tony, to make a small pancake plate, just something warm and soft for the boy. Tony raised an eyebrow. He's not with someone, he asked. No parent? Emily shook her head. Not that I can tell. He walked in alone. Tony didn't say more. He simply went to work. A few of the regular customers were whispering. Now, one of them, an older woman named Mrs. Grant, leaned toward Emily as she walked by. You should call the police, she said. That boy might be a runaway, or worse. You don't want to get in trouble for helping him. Emily gave a polite nod but didn't say yes or no. In her mind, she wasn't thinking about rules. She was thinking about how scared the boy had looked. Sometimes people needed warmth before they needed questions. She brought the pancakes, too. The boy placed the plate in front of him. He looked at her again, his eyes softer now. He picked up the fork and began to eat slowly. Each bite was careful, as if he wasn't sure if he was allowed to enjoy it. Emily sat nearby, watching him. She didn't need answers right now. She just wanted to make sure he was okay. After a while, he looked at her and whispered, Thank you. It was the first thing he had said all morning. His voice was small but clear. Emily smiled, and for the first time that day, her tiredness faded a little. You're welcome, she replied gently. She asked his name, but he hesitated. After a pause, he said, Noah. That was all. No last name, no details. Just Noah. She didn't push for more. The name was enough for now. As the boy finished his pancakes, he kept the toy dinosaur on the table next to his plate. Every now and then, he'd touch it lightly, as if to check it was still there. Emily couldn't help but feel a deep sadness. Mixed with hope, she didn't know where he had come from or how he ended up here, but she was glad he had. The hours passed slowly. The snow outside continued to fall, and the sky darkened even though it was still morning. Emily debated whether she should call the authorities. She didn't want the boy to be taken to a shelter where he'd be just another case file. But she also knew she couldn't let him wander back out into the cold. She picked up her phone, staring at it, wondering what the right thing was. Just then, she heard the sound of a car engine outside. It was louder than usual, expensive. A moment later, the door to the diner opened and everything began to change. But Emily didn't know that yet. At that moment, all she cared about was the little boy sitting in a booth, holding a toy dinosaur like it was his only friend in the world. The sound of the cold wind kept hitting the diner windows, but inside, things were slowly starting to feel warmer. The heater buzzed softly in the background, and the smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. Emily stayed close to the small booth where Noah was sitting. She didn't want him to feel alone again. He was still holding onto the toy dinosaur, now with both hands, like it was something magical. He didn't play with it much, just held it tightly to his chest, as if it gave him some kind of safety no one else could provide. Emily had seen a lot of people come and go through the diner over the years, tired truck drivers, lost tourists, angry customers, and kind-hearted strangers. But Noah was different. There was something deep in his eyes. He didn't look like a child who was just having a bad day. He looked like a child who had carried too much pain for someone his age. She quietly poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the stool behind the counter, still keeping an eye on him. He was now finished with his pancakes. His plate was clean, not a single crumb left. He drank the rest of his warm milk and placed the empty cup gently on the table. Emily watched how careful and quiet he was, how he didn't make noise, how he avoided meeting people's eyes. It was almost like he was trying to stay invisible. A man who came in often for his morning coffee looked at the boy and then at Emily. Is he all right? He asked. Emily gave a small nod. He just needed some food and warmth, she replied. The man raised his eyebrows but didn't ask more. People often had opinions, but rarely did they try to understand the full story. Emily walked back to the booth and crouched down next to Noah. You feeling a little better now? She asked softly, looked at her and nodded once. He didn't smile, but the fear in his face had faded a little. She noticed his eyes were now moving around more, freely observing the lights, the people, and even the small napkin holder on the table. Slowly, the walls he had built around himself were coming down. Do you have someone I can call? Emily asked gently, trying not to scare him. Maybe a parent or someone who's looking for you? Noah didn't answer. His fingers tightened around the dinosaur. For a moment, it looked like he might speak, but then he shook his head. Emily sighed softly. She didn't want to pressure him, but she was starting to feel worried. A child this young couldn't be alone for long. Someone had to be looking for him. She sat down across from him again, giving him space. It's okay, you don't have to tell me anything if you don't want to, she said. You're safe here, I promise. Those words seemed to help. Noah looked at her, really looked this time, and something in his expression softened. For the first time, she saw the slightest curve at the edge of his lips. Not quite a smile, but close. A couple more customers came in and out. The noise in the diner rose a little, but Emily kept her focus on Noah. He was now slowly moving the dinosaur across the table, making soft noises under his breath. She pretended not to hear, letting him enjoy his moment of play. It was the first time she saw a little bit of the child he really was under all the fear. She walked back to the kitchen for a moment, talking with Tony the cook. I think he's been out there for a while, she said quietly. He's not hurt, but I don't think he's okay either. Tony wiped his hands on a towel. You think he ran away from something? Emily shook her head. I don't know, he won't say. But he's not just lost. There's something more. Tony nodded. You gonna call someone I don't know yet? Emily said. I just want him to feel safe for now. Back at the booth, Noah was now looking at the window. Snow was still falling, slowly but steadily. Pressed his small hand against the glass, watching the snowflakes melt on contact. He looked thoughtful, quiet. Emily walked back with a small bowl of soup. It's not fancy, but it's warm, she said. Noah turned and gave her another silent nod. He began to eat again. Spoonful by spoonful, carefully, like every bite was important. Emily sat across from him again. Do you like dinosaurs? She asked, trying to make conversation. Noah nodded. That one, he said softly, pointing at the toy. It's a T-Rex. Emily smiled. He looks like a strong one. Noah looked down at the toy and nodded again. He protects. 2 words hit Emily hard. She realized he didn't just like the toy because it was fun. He liked it because it made him feel protected. She reached out and gently tapped the toy's head. Then he's the perfect friend for you. Noah didn't speak again for a while. But there was peace in his silence now, not fear. Emily went back to her shift, taking care of the other customers, wiping down counters, and refilling coffee. But her eyes always came back to Noah. It was like something inside her had attached to him, a string of invisible understanding. She didn't know why she felt so connected, but she knew she had to help. An hour passed. The diner was starting to clear out. The regulars were finishing their meals and heading back out into the snowy world. Just as Emily was beginning to think she should call someone, maybe the local shelter, or the police, she noticed Noah stiffen. He sat up straight and looked toward the window. His face, which had just started to relax, went blank again. Emily followed his gaze. A sleek black SUV was pulling into the diner's parking lot. It was large and expensive, the kind of car you didn't often see in their small town. The windows were tinted dark. It didn't fit in with the beat-up trucks and small family cars parked outside. Noah's hands tightened around his dinosaur. Emily knelt beside him. Hey, what is it? She asked softly. Before he could answer, the door to the diner swung open. A tall man stepped inside. He was wearing a long black coat over a dark suit. His shoes were polished, and his hair was neatly styled. Everything about him looked clean, powerful, and out of place in the cozy, messy diner. He looked around quickly, his eyes sharp and full of panic. Then, when his gaze landed on Noah, his whole face changed. His eyes softened with relief and something close to desperation. Rush toward the booth, Noah. Now, the man called out, his voice shaky. Oh my God, Noah. The boy stood up slowly, still holding the dinosaur. The man dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around him. I was so scared, the man whispered. I thought I lost you. Noah didn't pull away, but he didn't say anything either. He stood still in the man's arms, his face unreadable. Emily stood there, completely frozen. She had no idea what was happening. Who was this man? Where had he come from? The man looked up at her, his eyes full of emotion. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "You have no idea what you've done. I've been looking everywhere." Emily blinked, still unsure what to say. The man stood up, keeping one arm around Noah. "My name is Daniel Foster," he said. "Noah is my son." Emily's eyes widened. She knew that name. Everyone did. Daniel Foster was one of the richest men in the country, a tech billionaire known for staying out of the way. Spotlight. He rarely gave interviews, never showed off his wealth, and was known for being a private man. The kind of man no one expected to walk into a small-town diner. "I thought I'd lost him," Daniel said again, his voice quiet now. "He got separated from us while we were traveling. We've been searching for hours." Emily looked down at Noah, who was still holding the dinosaur tightly. Her heart ached. She had imagined he was poor, maybe homeless. But the truth was more complicated. Daniel looked around the diner, then back at Emily. "You didn't call the police?" She shook her head. He looked scared. "I didn't want to make it worse." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes full of respect. "Thank you for trusting your heart." He looked down at his son and said, "Are you okay, buddy?" Noah finally nodded. It was the clearest answer he had given all day. Emily stepped back, letting them have space. She didn't want to interrupt, but Daniel turned to her again. "Please," he said. "Before we go, I want to talk to you. You didn't just give him food, you gave him safety. That means more than anything." Emily didn't know what to say. She had no idea her simple kindness that morning would lead to this moment. She had just done what felt right, and somehow, without knowing it, she had helped someone far beyond anything she imagined. Emily stood frozen beside the booth, unsure of what to say or how to react. She had never imagined that the quiet, shivering boy who had entered the diner that morning was the son of a billionaire. It felt like something out of a movie, not real life. Daniel Foster, someone whose name had been on magazine covers and business headlines, was now standing in front of her, looking exhausted, thankful, and deeply emotional. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept in days, and he kept one hand gently on Noah's shoulder, as if afraid to let go again. Noah hadn't said anything since his father arrived, but he didn't move away either. He stood close to Daniel, holding the toy dinosaur like it was his shield. Emily noticed how the boy's eyes kept flicking between her and his father, trying to understand what was happening. He looked overwhelmed, like he was trying to believe that he was safe now. Daniel turned to Emily again. "Can we sit for a minute?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, still too stunned to speak clearly. She guided them to a corner booth where it was quieter, away from the few remaining customers. As they sat down, Daniel leaned forward and placed both hands on the table, breathing deeply like he was trying to calm himself. "I've never been more scared in my life," he said quietly. "Noah got separated from our group this morning. We were heading out of town, and we stopped briefly at a gas station nearby. One second he was there, the next he was gone. The car doors were unlocked, and I think he stepped out looking for something. Maybe a toy he dropped, and I realized he was missing. We searched everywhere." He looked at Emily, his expression filled with pain. "We called the police, activated all emergency protocols, even got a chopper ready to search from above. But we couldn't find him. It was like he vanished." Emily listened carefully, still watching Noah, who was now sitting beside his father but leaning slightly toward her direction. She noticed that even in his father's presence, the boy still found some comfort in knowing she was nearby. That thought touched her deeply. "He walked here alone?" Daniel asked, looking at Noah. Noah nodded slowly. "I followed the road," he said, his voice very quiet. "It was cold." Emily spoke softly. "It was freezing when he came in." "Wet clothes?" "Barely said a word. Just sat there shaking. I gave him some milk, then pancakes, and..." Daniel's eyes shifted to the green plastic dinosaur that Noah still held. "He hasn't let it go," he said with a faint smile. "I thought maybe he was lost. Or maybe something worse," Emily said honestly. "But he didn't want to talk, so I just tried to make him feel safe." Daniel nodded slowly. "You did more than that. You gave him comfort. You saw him. Most people wouldn't have." There was a long pause. Outside, the snow was starting to slow. Diner felt warm in a new way. It wasn't just the heater or the coffee. It was the weight of what had just happened. The way one simple act of kindness had led to something much bigger. Daniel looked around the diner, its old furniture, chipped counter, the faint smell of grease and coffee beans. I hate this place. He said, "It's not fancy, but it feels real." Emily chuckled softly. "It's home to a lot of stories." Daniel smiled. Then he looked serious again. "Emily, may I ask something?" She nodded. Double quotes. "What made you help him the way you did?" "You didn't know him. Didn't look like someone from a good home. You could have called the police or ignored him like so many others probably did." Emily thought for a moment before answering. "Honestly, I don't know. I just saw a scared little boy." "Where? I don't be ever. Why otter? Why I man I cry to rare why we I will I cry red I cry I go ahead guy I to go I go in over way when I will I've been alone, I guess. I couldn't walk away. Daniel leaned back in his seat, clearly affected by her words. "You know," he said, "money gives you a lot of things. Power, access, comfort. But it can't buy this." He gestured around the table. "It's kind of heart." Emily felt her cheeks grow warm. She wasn't used to compliments, especially not from people like him. Noah finally looked up at her. "Can I come back sometime?" he asked shyly. Emily smiled gently. "Of course, sweetheart. Any time." Daniel raised his eyebrows, surprised by Noah's question. It was clear the boy had felt something in this place, something healing. Emily's care had reached him in a way words couldn't. "I should take him home," Daniel said quietly. "But before I go, I want to do something for you." Emily shook her head quickly. "You don't have to." But Daniel held up his hand. "Please, I insist. You don't understand what you've done. You gave my son safety when I couldn't. You gave him hope when he was alone. It deserves more than just a thank you." Emily hesitated. "I didn't do it for anything. I just cared." Daniel looked directly into her eyes. "That's why I want to help you." There was another long pause. Emily's mind was spinning. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like her. She worked long hours, paid bills late, and dreamed small because big dreams always felt out of reach. But now, here was a man who could change everything, offering her something she didn't even know how to ask for. Tony peeked out from the kitchen and looked surprised. To see Daniel still there, he gave Emily a curious look, but she waved him off. Daniel stood up slowly and took out a business card from his wallet. He handed it to her. "That's my personal number," he said. "If you ever need anything at all, you call me. No assistants, no middlemen, just me." Emily took the card with shaking fingers. She looked down at it. It was simple and clean. His name, a number. Nothing fancy. Noah stood up too, still holding the toy dinosaur. Daniel gently wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "Are you ready to go home?" I asked his son. Noah looked at Emily, then nodded. "Can I take it with me?" he asked, showing her the toy. She smiled warmly. "Of course, sweetheart. Dinosaur now. He protects you. Remember?" Noah smiled for real this time. Soft, small, but real smile. "Thank you," he said again. Daniel looked at both of them, his eyes filled with emotion. "You've given me more than you know." With that, he opened the door. Cold air rushed in again. Emily stood by the window and watched as they got into the black SUV. The engine started. The lights came on and slowly the car pulled away into the snowy road. Emily stood there for a long time, still, holding the card in her hand. The diner was quiet again. The booth was empty, but somehow it felt full. Something had changed in the air, in her, in everything. She sat down slowly and looked around. Everything was the same, the coffee machine humming, the bell above the door swinging slightly, the snow tapping softly on the windows, but Emily felt something new inside her chest. A warmth, a feeling that maybe kindness really did come back to you, not always in the way you expect, but in the way you need. She thought of Noah's quiet voice. He protects. She thought of Daniel's eyes, filled with gratitude. She thought of the fact that one small decision, bringing a toy dinosaur to a frightened boy, had opened the door to something so much bigger. She didn't know what would happen next. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But she knew one thing for sure. That morning, she had followed her heart, and it had led her to a little boy who needed her more than anything. The diner felt strangely quiet after the black SUV disappeared into the snowy road. Emily stood near the window for a few more seconds, staring into the white distance. Her fingers were still curled around the simple white business card that Daniel Foster had given her. The warmth from her fingertips hadn't left it yet. She finally slid the card into her apron pocket and returned to the counter, though her thoughts were far from her routine tasks. The tables still needed wiping, coffee cups needed refilling, and the same background music played from the small speaker in the corner, but something had changed in her, something she couldn't describe. It wasn't just because a billionaire had walked into her life or that his lost son had sat in her booth. It was deeper than that. It was a reminder that the world could still surprise her in the best ways. Tony came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "You okay?" he asked, raising his eyebrows. Emily nodded slowly. "Yeah, just trying to understand what just happened." Tony gave a small laugh. "You and me both." That was the Daniel Foster, right? Like, billionaire, tech genius, news headlines kind of Daniel Foster? Emily smiled faintly. The same. Tony shook his head in disbelief. "Well, guess the world's smaller than we thought." Emily didn't respond. Her mind kept replaying the last 2 hours, the way Noah had walked in, shivering and silent. The way she had trusted her instinct to help him without asking questions. The way he had clutched the toy dinosaur like it was his lifeline. And then the moment Daniel had rushed through the door, a powerful man who had looked just as broken as any father would have in that situation. That night, when her shift ended and she walked home through the soft snowfall, her thoughts were still full of Noah. She wondered if he had eaten dinner, if he was sleeping in a warm bed, if he had told his father about the pancakes or the toy dinosaur. More than anything, she wondered if he was okay, truly okay. Days passed. The snow slowly melted. The news cycle moved on, though Emily noticed a small article online one night with the headline, "Daniel Foster's son found safe after short disappearance." There was no mention of her, no mention of the diner. And Emily liked it that way. She hadn't helped Noah for fame or attention. She had helped him because he needed someone. She put the toy shelf back in order, cleaned the booth where Noah had sat. Life at the diner returned to its usual rhythm. The regular customers, the sound of cutlery, the smell of burnt toast in the mornings. But there was a new feeling inside Emily, a quiet hope she hadn't felt in a long time. 1 week later, just as she was finishing her afternoon shift, the front door of the diner opened again. This time it was a man in a suit, tall, polite, not flashy, but clearly professional. He looked around, spotted her behind the counter, and approached. "Miss Emily?" he asked gently. She blinked, surprised. "Yes." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "Mr. Daniel Foster asked me to deliver this to you personally." Emily took the envelope slowly. It had no markings, just her name written in neat handwriting. She looked up, but the man simply gave a respectful nod and left as quietly as he had arrived. Emily opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter on thick, clean paper. The writing was elegant, but the message was warm and honest. Daniel had written, "Dear Emily, I've thought of you every day since you helped my son. I still cannot fully express what your kindness meant to both of us. You acted from your heart, without expectation, and I will always be grateful for that. I spoke to Noah. He told me everything about the warm milk, the pancakes, the toy dinosaur, and how safe he felt in your presence. You didn't just feed him. You gave him something I could not in that moment. Peace. I'd like to offer you a position in my company. We run a hospitality training program, a place where people like you can teach others what true service and compassion look like. You have a gift, Emily. The world needs more people like you, and I'd be honored if you'd consider sharing your heart with others. If you're willing, transportation, housing, and support will be arranged. No pressure. This is just a door. Whether you walk through it is up to you. With deepest gratitude, Daniel Foster Emily read the letter 3 times. Each time, her heart pounded faster. She sat down slowly, her legs feeling weak. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine something bigger, a life beyond the small diner. Beyond the daily struggle, beyond her quiet routine. She didn't tell anyone right away. She kept the letter in a drawer in her apartment, reading it every night before bed. She thought about what it meant to leave the life she knew, to take a risk, to start something new. Wasn't used to being chosen for anything. She wasn't used to doors opening for her. One evening, after a long shift and another cold walk home, she finally took out the card Daniel had given her. Her fingers hovered over her phone for several minutes before she took a deep breath and dialed. The line rang once, twice, then picked up Emily. It was Daniel's voice, calm, familiar. "Yes, it's me. I'm glad you called." There was a long pause, then Emily said, "I'd like to try." Daniel didn't ask what she meant. He simply said, "Then let's begin." Within a week, arrangements were made. Emily gave her notice at the diner. Tony looked stunned, but proud. "You're going to do great things," he said, patting her shoulder. "You've always had a way of making people feel human." On her last day, she packed her few belongings, a couple of old books, a small radio, and a photo of her late mother. She said goodbye to her quiet apartment and boarded a car that Daniel had sent. She didn't know exactly where life was taking her, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. The place Daniel had described was a hospitality center located on the edge of a city. A beautiful building with clean glass windows, warm colors, and people who smiled when they saw her. It wasn't like any office she'd imagined. It felt more like a home for people who cared. Daniel met her in person at the entrance. He wasn't in a suit this time, just jeans and a sweater. He looked relaxed, like a father instead of a businessman. He shook her hand, then hugged her gently. "Noah talks about you all the time," he said with a smile. "He keeps the dinosaur on his nightstand." Emily smiled. "That makes me happy." He gave her a tour, showing her the classrooms, the guest rooms, and the areas where they trained new staff from hotels and restaurants across the country. But this place was different. It wasn't just about folding napkins or pouring wine. It was about understanding people, reading faces, offering comfort, just like Emily had done. "You're not just working here," Daniel said. "You're leading. We've created a program around your experience, how kindness can't be taught by books. You'll train others to lead with heart." Emily was speechless. She had gone from cleaning sticky tables to teaching people how to care, all because she had offered a toy to a scared little boy in the middle of a snowy morning. She started her first class a week later. She was nervous at first, but when she spoke about what had happened, how she saw a child who needed someone and simply did what felt right, the room went quiet. Every person listened, truly listened, and that was the beginning. Emily's name began to spread quietly through the company, not as a hero, not as a celebrity, but as a woman who had reminded them all what real hospitality meant. She traveled to different places, shared her story, and mentored new trainees. She didn't become rich. She didn't need to. What she gained was purpose, a reason to wake up and smile. A life filled with people who valued her, not for her title, but for her heart. She still kept the toy dinosaur on her desk, not the original, of course, but a replica Daniel had given her. A symbol of the day everything changed. A reminder that sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest waves, and every now and then, a familiar little boy would visit the center with his father. Noah would run up to her with that same quiet smile, still shy, still gentle, and Emily would hug him tightly, whispering the same words she had once said that snowy day in the diner. "You're safe here." Time passed slowly, yet filled with quiet magic. Emily's life, which had once felt small and limited to the worn walls of the diner, now stretched out in front of her like an open road she never imagined walking. Every day brought new faces, new stories, and new chances to make a difference. She had become more than a waitress. She was a teacher, a mentor, and a beacon of hope for many. Her days began early, filled with training sessions, heartfelt conversations, and moments of deep reflection. Each person she met came with their own fears and doubts, and Emily's gentle words and warm smile were often the first light they saw in a long time. Noah's visits had become a special part of her life. The little boy who once trembled in the cold diner now walked beside his father with confidence. He was still shy, but had grown stronger, his laughter echoing in the training center's halls. He would sometimes bring his toy dinosaur, now worn, and love to show Emily, as if to say, "Remember when you made me feel safe?" Daniel Foster remained a constant presence, not just as a billionaire or a businessman, but as a grateful father and a friend to Emily. He had watched her transformation with pride and often said that she had saved his son's life in ways no money ever could. One afternoon, Emily found herself sitting alone in her small office, looking out the window at the soft rain falling on the city. The light was dim, but inside her heart a bright warmth grew. She thought about the path that had brought her here from the moment Noah had walked into the diner, shaking and silent, to the day she accepted Daniel's offer to help others. She realized that her life was no longer defined by hardships or struggles. It was defined by kindness, courage, and the willingness to see the good in others. She had learned that sometimes the simplest act, offering a toy, a warm meal, a listening ear, could change a life forever. Emily's mind drifted back to that snowy morning when Noah had come to her table, and she had given him the toy dinosaur. At the time, it seemed like such a small thing, but it had sparked a chain of events that led to something extraordinary. She smiled softly, knowing that her heart had been right all along. The training center was thriving. More and more people joined the program, inspired by Emily's story and her message. The work wasn't easy. There were long hours, setbacks, and moments when the challenges seemed too great. But every time she felt tired or discouraged, she remembered Noah's brave little face and Daniel's heartfelt thanks. She also thought about her own past, the quiet moments of loneliness, the times when she had felt invisible and unimportant. Those memories gave her strength. They reminded her why she had to keep going, why she had to be a light for others. One day a young woman came to Emily's office. She was nervous but determined. "I want to join your program," she said softly. "I want to learn how to care like you do." Emily smiled and reached out her hand. "Welcome," she said. "You're exactly where you need to be." As the years went by, Emily's impact grew beyond the training center. She spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and became a symbol of hope for many. But she never forgot her roots. She still visited the diner whenever she could, sitting in the same booth where Noah had first found comfort. The diner was still run by Tony, who had kept it alive with love and determination. When Emily walked in, the regular customers smiled and greeted her warmly. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a part of their story, too. One chilly evening, as Emily sat sipping coffee at the counter, a young boy entered the diner alone. He looked scared and cold, much like Noah had been years ago. Emily's heart stirred. She smiled gently and went over to him. "Would you like some warm milk and pancakes?" she asked softly, just as she had done before. The boy nodded shyly, and Emily knew the story was not over. It was only just beginning again. She handed him a small toy dinosaur from the shelf, a little worn but full of love. "This is for you," she said. "You're safe here." And in that moment, Emily understood the true meaning of her journey. It wasn't about fame or money or even gratitude. It was about kindness, simple and pure. Reaching across the lives of strangers and lighting the way through the darkest moments, Emily had become a living example of how one small act could ripple outward, touching countless lives in ways no one could measure. She had learned that everyone needed someone to believe in them, to see them, and to offer a hand when they were trembling in the cold. Her story was proof that sometimes the greatest power lies not in wealth or status, but in the courage to care. Emily looked at the boy with gentle eyes, ready to give him the same hope she had once given Noah. The toy dinosaur was more than just a toyette, was a symbol of safety, trust, and the endless possibilities that come when we choose to be kind. The diner hummed softly around them, a warm place in a cold world. And Emily smiled, knowing that her heart would always guide her to those who needed her most. Let me know if you'd like me to help with anything else.